Dr. Elena Rodriguez stared at the screen in disbelief. After 3 weeks of traveling through empty space, her research ship had picked up something impossible. A distress signal from a planet that wasn't supposed to have any life on it. "Are you seeing this?" she called to Captain James Park, who was reviewing navigation charts nearby. The signal was weak but steady, repeating the same mathematical pattern over and over again. "That's definitely artificial," Park said, moving closer, to look at the data. "But according to our star charts, Kepler 442b was abandoned 50 years ago. Nothing should be alive down there." Elena felt her heart racing. As the lead scientist on this mission, she had spent years studying reports of lost civilizations, but finding one that might still be alive? That was the discovery of a lifetime. "We have to go down and look," she said. "Whatever's down there is asking for help." The planet looked sick from orbit. Brown clouds covered most of the surface, and the blue-green areas that should have been oceans looked more like muddy puddles. But their scanners showed something amazing. There were still cities down there, and something was definitely alive inside them. When their shuttle touched down outside the largest city, Elena couldn't believe what she saw. Beautiful crystal. Towers stretched toward the sky, but they were cracked and broken. Strange plants with glowing leaves grew wild through empty streets. And walking slowly between the ruined buildings were the most incredible beings Elena had ever seen. They looked almost like living glass sculptures. Their skin was clear blue, like looking through colored water, and patterns of light moved under. Their surface like tiny lightning storms. They were tall and thin, with long arms that ended in delicate fingers. When they moved, they seemed to flow rather than walk, but something was terribly wrong. Many of them walked with difficulty, their beautiful light patterns flickering weakly. Some had dark spots on their skin that looked like cracks in broken glass. The worst part was seeing their children. Small versions of these beautiful beings, but with twisted limbs and dim, barely glowing patterns. "My God," whispered Dr. Lisa Chen, the team's medical expert. "They're sick, all of them." Elena approached one of the beings carefully, holding up her hands to show she meant no harm. The creature, she decided to think of it as he, based on the deeper tones of his voice, stood perfectly still, watching her with large, sad eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Using simple drawings in the dirt and basic mathematical symbols, Elena and her team slowly began to communicate. What they learned broke their hearts. These beings called themselves Zephyrians. They had once been part of something called the Dominion Alliance, a group of powerful alien civilizations that controlled this part of the galaxy. The Zephyrians had been valued members, contributing art, technology, and scientific knowledge that helped many worlds. But 50 years ago, their children started being born wrong. The glowing patterns that showed health and happiness grew dim. Babies were born with twisted bodies that couldn't support their crystalline structure. The adults began getting sick too, their beautiful flowing movements becoming stiff and painful. The Zephyrians begged their allies in the Dominion for help. They shared all their medical knowledge, offered their remaining resources, and pleaded for assistance in finding a cure. But instead of help, they received a cold message that changed everything. "Your species shows signs of genetic failure," the message had said. "The Dominion cannot waste resources on a dying race. You are hereby removed from our protection and alliance. Do not contact us again." Just like that, 50 years of friendship and partnership ended. The advanced medical equipment stopped working because no one would send replacement parts. The ships that brought food and supplies stopped coming. Other civilizations that had once traded with them turned away, following the Dominion's lead. Elena watched an elderly Zephyrian. The patterns under his skin were so dim they were barely visible, carefully tending to a small garden of glowing plants. His movements were slow and painful, but he never stopped working. When he noticed her watching, he made a sound that her translation device interpreted as something like, Hope song for tomorrow. Why? Elena asked through their primitive communication system. Why do you keep trying? The old Zephyrian's response was simple but powerful. He pointed to a group of young Zephyrians playing a gentle game with floating spheres of light. Even though they moved awkwardly and their lights were dim, they were laughing, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Life spark continues, the translation device said. While spark exists, hope exists. Dr. Chen had been studying tissue samples and running medical scans all week. When she finally called everyone together, her face was grim but determined. I've got good news and terrible news, she said. The good news is this isn't a genetic disease at all. It's some kind of engineered virus that's attacking their cellular structure. The terrible news is that it's incredibly sophisticated. Someone designed this specifically to target Zephyrian biology. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. You mean someone did this to them on purpose? That's exactly what I mean, Chen replied. And whoever made it wanted to make sure it would kill them slowly, over generations. Captain Park was quiet for a long moment. So the Dominion didn't abandon them because they were naturally failing. They abandoned them because someone was murdering them slowly. Elena thought about the old Zephyrian in the garden, still tending his plants despite everything that had been done to his people. She thought about the children playing in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. She thought about 50 years of suffering that could have been prevented if anyone had cared enough to help. We have to do something, she said finally. We can't just leave them here to die. The Dominion made it clear that anyone who helps them would be considered an enemy, Park warned. If we get involved, we could be putting all of humanity at risk. Elena looked out the window at a young Zephyrian mother holding her sick child, humming a lullaby that glowed softly in the air around them. The child's light patterns were so weak they could barely be seen, but the mother never stopped singing. Then we'll have to take that risk, Elena said, because if we walk away from this, how are we any different from the civilizations that abandoned them? That night, Elena sent a long message back to Earth. She described everything they had found, the sick children, the abandoned city, the engineered plague that had been slowly destroying an entire species while the galaxy looked the other way. She ended with a simple request. We cannot call ourselves human if we turn away from those who suffer simply because helping them might be difficult. These people have been forgotten by everyone else, but they don't have to be forgotten by us. Send help. Send hope. Send the message that Earth stands with those who have no one else to stand with them. As she sent the message into space, Elena looked up at the stars and wondered what kind of galaxy they lived in. One where an entire civilization could be abandoned to die simply because helping them was inconvenient. But she also knew what kind of species humanity was. They were the kind who ran toward danger to help others. They were the kind who said no when everyone else said that's just how things are. They were the kind who believed that every life had value, no matter what anyone else said. The Zephyrians had been waiting 50 years for someone to care. Elena was determined to make sure their wait was finally over. Admiral Rebecca Kim stared at the message on her screen and felt her jaw clench. The Dominion Alliance wasn't just asking humanity to abandon the Zephyrians. They were demanding it. Effective immediately, all human vessels will withdraw from Kepler 442b, she read aloud to her staff. Any continued presence will be considered an act of aggression against Dominion interests. Colonel David Rodriguez, her second in command, shook his head. They're not even pretending to care about those people anymore. 50 ships, Admiral. That's what they're sending to make sure we leave. Kim had been in the military for 25 years. She'd seen wars, peace treaties, and political games that cost lives. But this was different. This wasn't about territory or resources or power. This was about whether humanity would stand by and watch an entire species die just because helping them was inconvenient. Get me a direct line to Earth Command, she said, and prep the fleet for departure. Rodriguez looked confused. We're leaving? Kim smiled grimly. We're leaving, all right. We're leaving to get reinforcements. Back on Earth, the debate was already raging. Ambassador Thomas Park stood before the United Colonial Council, facing a room full of angry politicians who were all talking at once. You want us to start a war over aliens we've never even heard of? Senator William Hayes shouted over the noise. Do you know what this will cost us? The Dominion controls half the trade routes in our sector. The Dominion abandoned these people to die, Park replied calmly. If we do the same thing, what does that make us? Smart, Hayes shot back. It makes us smart enough to survive in a galaxy that doesn't care about our feelings. Secretary of Defense Maria Santos stood up, and the room gradually quieted down. She was known for being practical, not emotional. When she spoke, people listened. I've read Dr. Rodriguez's reports, she said. The Zephyrians aren't just dying from some natural disease. Someone poisoned them. Someone spent years designing a weapon specifically to wipe out their entire species, slowly and painfully. Room went completely silent. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, Santos continued, but I didn't join this government to turn my back on genocide just because it's happening to people who don't look like us. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away on Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was working 18-hour days in a makeshift laboratory. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the face of a young Zephyrian named Crystal Song, whose light patterns were growing dimmer every day. I think I've got something, Dr. Lisa Chen called from across the lab. She was hunched over a microscope, her eyes red from exhaustion. Elena, you need to see this. Elena rushed over and looked into the microscope. What she saw made her heart race. The Zephyrian cells weren't just being attacked by the virus, they were fighting back. Their unique crystalline structure was actually trying to adapt, to find a way around the damage. It's like their bodies know how to heal themselves, Chen said excitedly. They just need help getting started. What kind of help? Chen pulled up a complex diagram on her computer. Remember how we use gene therapy to fix genetic disorders in humans? I think we can do something similar here, but instead of fixing genes, we're fixing their cellular structure. Elena felt a surge of hope. How long would it take? To develop the treatment? Maybe 6 months if everything goes perfectly. Chen's expression grew serious. But Elena, we'd need samples from healthy Zephyrian cells to make it work. And I don't think there are any healthy Zephyrians left on this planet. That's when the voice came from behind them. Perhaps we can help with that problem. Both women spun around to see Crystal Song standing in the doorway. The young Zephyrian had been learning English remarkably quickly, and his translation device was getting better every day. You have healthy cells? Elena asked hopefully. Crystal Song's light patterns shifted to what Elena had learned meant sadness mixed with determination. Not here. But the old archives speak of a place called the Memory Vault. Before the sickness came, our wisest healers stored samples of pure Zephyrian essence there. Where is this vault? Beneath the old capital. It has been sealed for 40 years because the journey is too dangerous for our weakened people. Crystal Song's lights flickered brighter. But perhaps not too dangerous for humans. 3 days later, Elena found herself rappelling down a crystal shaft that seemed to go on forever. Captain James Park and 2 of his best soldiers were with her, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. I still think this is crazy, Park muttered over the comm. We don't even know if this vault really exists. Crystal Song wouldn't lie to us, Elena replied, though privately she was having her own doubts. They'd been climbing down for 2 hours, and there was still no sign of the bottom. Finally, their lights revealed a chamber carved from living crystal. The walls pulsed with faint patterns of light, like a heartbeat that had been slowing down for decades. In the center of the room stood a pillar covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "It's beautiful," whispered Sergeant Lisa Park, the captain's younger sister. She was the team's tech specialist, and she was already scanning the pillar with her equipment. "Elena, these aren't just decorations. They're some kind of storage system." Elena approached the pillar carefully. As she got closer, the symbols began to glow brighter, responding to her presence. When she placed her hand on the crystal surface, the entire chamber lit up like sunrise. Suddenly, the air filled with images. Not holograms, but something more real than that. Elena saw Zephyrians as they had been before the sickness. Tall and graceful, their bodies blazing with light, their movements like poetry in motion. She saw their cities when they were whole, their art, their music, their children playing in gardens that glowed like captured starlight. And then she saw the samples they had come for, thousands of them, preserved in crystal matrix, waiting for the day when someone would need them to bring their people back to health. "We found it," Elena whispered into her comm. "We actually found it." But their celebration was cut short by Captain Park's urgent voice. "Elena, we've got company up top. Dominion ships just entered orbit." Elena's hands moved quickly, gathering as many samples as she could carry. "How long do we have?" "Maybe an hour before they send troops down," Park replied. "But Elena, there's something else. Admiral Kim is on her way back with the entire Terran defense fleet. 37 ships." Elena felt her blood run cold. "They're really going to fight?" "Looks like it. The Council voted this morning. Humanity officially rejects Dominion authority. Over Kepler 442b, we're staying to protect the Zephyrians, no matter what it costs us." As Elena climbed back toward the surface with her precious cargo, she thought about what was about to happen. Humanity was about to go to war with one of the most powerful alliances in the galaxy, all to protect the people they had only known for a few weeks. But when she emerged from the vault and saw Crystal Song waiting for her, his dim light patterns, brightening with hope when he saw the samples she carried, Elena knew they were doing the right thing. "Will it work?" Crystal Song asked quietly. Elena looked at the young Zephyrian, thinking about all the children on this world who had never known what it felt like to be truly healthy. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But we're going to try, and we're not going to stop trying no matter who tells us to." Above them, the first Dominion ships were already visible in the sky, dark shapes against the stars. But Elena wasn't afraid anymore. Humanity had made its choice. They would stand with the forgotten, fight for the abandoned, and prove that some things were worth more than political convenience. The real test was just beginning. The first sign of trouble came when the cargo ships stopped arriving at Luna Station. Captain Derek Chen watched the empty docking bays through the observation deck windows, feeling a knot form in his stomach. Those ships carried food supplies for the outer colonies that were already struggling to feed their people. "How bad is it?" he asked Commander Lisa Wong, who was reviewing the latest shipping reports. "Bad," she replied without looking up. "The Dominion has convinced every major shipping company to stop doing business with human colonies. They're calling it economic protection, but we all know what it really is." Chen sighed. 3 weeks had passed since humanity had refused to abandon the Zephyrians, and the consequences were hitting home hard. The Dominion Alliance controlled the biggest trade routes in the galaxy, and they were using that power like a weapon against Earth and all its colonies. On Mars Colony, Governor Patricia Rodriguez was dealing with riots in the streets. Angry, colonists had gathered outside the government buildings carrying signs that read, "Feed our children first and stop the alien war." "You're destroying us for people we've never even met," shouted one protester through a megaphone. "My kids are going hungry because you want to play hero." Rodriguez understood their anger. She had 2 children of her own, and watching food prices triple while job opportunities disappeared was breaking her heart too. But every time she considered changing her position, She remembered the reports from Kepler 442b. She remembered reading about Zephyrian children who had never known what it felt like to be healthy, who had spent their entire lives watching their bodies slowly fail them. "I know this is hard," she told the crowd from the government building steps. "I know you're scared and angry, and you have every right to be. But we're not just fighting for aliens on some distant world. We're fighting for the idea that when someone needs help, we don't turn our backs just because helping is difficult." Back on Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was working on what might be the most important experiment in human history. Using the samples from the memory vault, she and Dr. Lisa Chen had developed a treatment that could potentially reverse the damage caused by the engineered virus. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked Crystal Song, who was lying on the medical table. The young Zephyrian had volunteered to be the first test subject, despite the risks. "My people have been dying for 50 years, Crystal Song replied, his light patterns showing determination mixed with fear. "If there is a chance to live again, truly live, then I must take it." Elena's hands shook as she prepared the injection. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. If the treatment failed, Crystal Song could die. If it worked, it might save an entire species. "Here we go," she whispered, and pressed the injector against Crystal Song's arm. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Crystal Song's light patterns began to flicker wildly. Elena's heart raced as his vital signs spiked on the monitors. But just when she thought something was going wrong, the flickering stopped, and Crystal Song's body blazed with light. The patterns under his skin weren't the dim, barely visible traces they had been before. They were bright and vibrant, flowing like liquid starlight through his crystalline form. For the first time since Elena had met him, Crystal Song looked truly healthy. "I can feel it," he whispered in wonder. "The pain is gone, the weakness. It's just gone." Dr. Chen was crying as she ran her scanners over Crystal Song's body. "Elena, look at these readings. His cellular structure is repairing itself. The virus isn't just gone. His body is actively rebuilding the damage it caused. Word of the successful. Treatment spread through the Zephyrian settlement like wildfire. Within hours, a line of volunteers stretched around the medical facility. Young and old, they came seeking the hope of health their people hadn't known in 2 generations. But the breakthrough came with a terrible realization. Elena stared at her supply of the treatment and did quick calculations in her head. "Lisa, we have enough for maybe 30 people," she said quietly. "There are over 10,000 Zephyrians on this planet." Chen looked up from her work. "Can we make more?" "Not here. We'd need full laboratory facilities, industrial-level production equipment." Elena felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. "We'd need to take them to Earth." That night, Admiral Rebecca Kim received an urgent message from the surface. When she finished reading Dr. Rodriguez's report, she immediately called for a meeting with her senior officers. "They want to evacuate the entire Zephyrian population to Earth," she announced to the stunned room. "Every man, woman, and child. Over 10,000 individuals." Commander David Martinez whistled low. "Admiral, with respect, Earth is already struggling with the economic blockade, adding 10,000 refugees who need specialized medical care." "I know what it means," Kim interrupted. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The debate that followed was heated but short. These weren't career politicians worried about their next election. These were military officers who had sworn to protect innocent lives, regardless of what species they belonged to. "We didn't come this far to give up now," Kim said finally. "Send the message to Earth Command. Tell them we're coming home and we're bringing friends." The response from Earth came 12 hours later. President Michael Park's message was brief but clear. Bring them home. All of them. But as the human fleet prepared for the massive evacuation, long-range sensors detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. A Dominion battle fleet was heading straight for them. Not 50 ships this time, but over 100. "They're not here to negotiate," reported Lieutenant Jennifer Collins from the sensor station. "Admiral, they're coming in full battle formation." Kim studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possible strategies. They were outnumbered 3-1, and they'd be trying to protect civilian transport ships full of refugees during the fighting. "Send a message to all ships," she ordered. "We knew this day might come. Today we find out what we're really made of." As the two fleets approached each other in the cold vacuum of space, Elena was helping load the first group of Zephyrians onto transport ships. The treated individuals were glowing so brightly they seemed like living stars, while those still, waiting for treatment, moved carefully, their dim patterns showing hope mixed with fear. "Will we be safe on your world?" asked an elderly Zephyrian named Harmony of Ages. Elena looked up at the sky, where she could see the lights of approaching warships. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I promise you this. We will never stop. Trying to keep you safe." Crystal Song approached, his new healthy body moving with a grace Elena had never seen before. "Dr. Rodriguez, my people have a saying. Light shared grows brighter. We may not know what tomorrow brings, but today we share our light with yours." As the first transport ships lifted off, carrying Zephyrian refugees toward Earth, Elena realized that humanity had already won something important. They had proven that compassion wasn't weakness, that standing up for others didn't make you a fool. But the real test was about to begin. Above them, the battle for the future of galactic civilization was about to unfold among the stars. Admiral Rebecca Kim stood on the bridge of the starship Defiance, watching the Dominion fleet approach like a storm of metal and death. 112 ships against her 47. The math was simple and terrifying. They're hailing. "Us," reported Communications Officer David Park. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that looked like it was built for war. Admiral Korath Vex of the Dominion had dark gray skin covered in battle scars and eyes that held no mercy whatsoever. "Human Admiral," Vex said, his voice like grinding metal. "You have exactly 1 hour to load your people onto your ships and leave this system forever. Take your pets with you if you must, but understand this. The Dominion will not tolerate your interference again." Kim stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. "Admiral Vex, these people are under the protection of the Terran Defense Force. Any attack on them will be considered an act of war." Vex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "War? You bring 47 ships against my battle fleet and speak of war? I have crushed entire civilizations with less effort than this will require." "Then you should know," Kim replied calmly, "that humans don't surrender just because the odds are bad." The screen went dark. Kim turned to her crew, seeing fear and determination mixed in equal measure on their faces. "All ships, battle stations, this is what we came here to do." Down on the planet's surface, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was loading the last group of Zephyrian children onto transport ships. The little ones were scared and confused, their light patterns flickering with anxiety as explosions began lighting up the sky above them. "Where are we going?" asked a small Zephyrian girl. "Named Light of Morning. Somewhere safe," Elena promised, though she wasn't sure if that was true anymore. "Somewhere you can grow up healthy and strong." Crystal Song, now blazing with the light of perfect health, was helping organize the evacuation. "Dr. Rodriguez, the last transport is full, but there are still 300 people waiting." Elena looked at the remaining Zephyrians and felt her heart break. There wasn't time for another trip. If the human fleet lost this battle, these people would be left behind to face Dominion revenge. "We'll figure something out," she said, though she had no idea how. Above them, the battle began. Captain Robert Torres commanded the destroyer Righteous Fury, one of the smallest ships in the human fleet. When Admiral Vex's forces opened fire, Torres watched massive energy beams tear through space toward the human formation. "All power to shields," he ordered. "Return fire!" The human ships were outgunned, but they had something the Dominion didn't expect. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves. Every human captain knew that retreat meant abandoning the Zephyrians to certain death. "Admiral, the Defiance is taking heavy damage," reported Torres over the comm. "They can't hold out much longer." Kim's flagship was indeed in trouble. 3 Dominion heavy cruisers had focused their fire on her, and her shields were failing fast. "All remaining ships, concentrate fire on their command vessel," she ordered. "If we're going down, we're taking Vex with us." But just as the human fleet was about to be overwhelmed, something impossible happened. New ships began dropping out of hyperspace, dozens of them, flying formations none of the humans recognized. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Park, his voice filled with shock. "We're receiving a message from the lead vessel. They're here to help us." The voice that came over the comm spoke in accented but clear English. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Veltar of the Altarian Republic. We stand with you today." Kim couldn't believe what she was hearing. The Altarians had been neutral for decades, never taking sides in any conflict. "Admiral Veltar, why? Why are you here?" "Because you showed us what courage looks like," came the reply. "For too long, we have watched the Dominion commit atrocities and done nothing because we were afraid. Today, that ends. The Altarian ships were sleek and fast, designed for quick strikes rather than heavy combat. But they attacked the Dominion flanks with precision and determination, disrupting Vex's careful formations. More ships kept arriving. The Centaurian Federation sent a squadron of their famous battle cruisers. The Independent Worlds Coalition contributed a mix of vessels from a dozen different species, all flying together under a banner that read, "Never Again," in 50 different languages. Admiral Vex found himself facing not just the human fleet, but an impromptu alliance of species who had decided they were tired of being afraid. "This is impossible," he snarled over the comm. "You're throwing away everything for a dying race that contributes nothing to galactic civilization." It was Captain Torres who answered him. The commander of the little destroyer had moved his ship between a Dominion dreadnought and a transport full of Zephyrian children. "You want to know what they contribute?" Torres said as his ship shook under enemy fire. "They showed us that there's still good in this galaxy. They reminded us that protecting the innocent is worth any price." Torres's ship was dying around him, but he held his position. "And you know what else? Today you're going to learn that humans don't abandon their friends." The righteous fury exploded in a ball of brilliant light, taking the Dominion dreadnought with it. Torres's sacrifice gave the transport ships time to escape, carrying their precious cargo of Zephyrian refugees to safety. Down on the surface, Crystal Song and the remaining Zephyrians watched the battle with growing amazement. Despite being outnumbered, the Allied fleet was holding its own against the Dominion forces. "Why?" asked old Harmony of Ages, her ancient voice filled with wonder. "Why do they fight so hard for us?" Crystal Song's light patterns shifted to show something the Zephyrians hadn't felt in 50 years, hope mixed with joy. "Because they believe that every life has value, even ours." As the battle continued above them, something extraordinary began to happen. The Zephyrians who had received Elena's treatment started moving toward the ancient power stations scattered around their city. "What are you doing?" Elena asked Crystal Song. "Something we haven't been able to do for generations," he replied. "We're going to fight back." The healthy Zephyrians placed their hands on the power stations, and their incredible light began to flow into the machinery. Ancient systems that had been dead for decades started humming to life. In space, Admiral Vex suddenly found his ship's systems acting strangely. Engines flickered and died. Weapons stopped firing. Communication arrays went silent. "What's happening to my fleet?" he demanded. His science officer looked up from his instruments in confusion. "Sir, We're detecting massive electromagnetic interference from the planet's surface. It's like something down there is talking directly to our computers." The Zephyrians, working together for the first time in half a century, were using their unique abilities to disrupt the Dominion ship's electronics. Their crystalline biology could generate and control electromagnetic fields in ways that no other species could match. One by one, Dominion ships found themselves drifting helplessly in space as their systems shut down. Vex's mighty battle fleet was being defeated not by superior firepower, but by the very people he had come to destroy. "This isn't over," Vex transmitted to the Allied fleet as his remaining ships retreated. "The Dominion will remember this insult." "Let them remember," Admiral Kim replied, "and let them remember that when they came for the innocent, the galaxy said no." As the Dominion fleet limped away, Elena stood with Crystal Song and the other Zephyrians, watching their ancient city pulse with life for the first time in generations. "You saved us," she told them. "All of us." Crystal Song's patterns glowed with quiet pride. "No, Dr. Rodriguez. You saved us first. We simply returned the favor." 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, President Michael Park stood before the largest gathering in human history. Representatives from over 200 different species filled the Great Assembly Hall on Luna Station, their various forms, creating a rainbow of colors, shapes, and sizes that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. "Today we celebrate more than just victory," Park announced to the vast crowd. "Today we celebrate the birth of something new, a galaxy where protecting the innocent isn't considered weakness, where standing up for others isn't called foolish." In the front row, Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat next to Crystal Song, whose brilliant light patterns had become a symbol of hope across known space. The young Zephyrian had grown into a leader among his people, helping to establish new colonies on dozens of worlds where his species could thrive again. "Did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Crystal Song asked quietly, his voice filled with wonder. Elena looked around the hall at creatures she couldn't have dreamed of 6 months ago, all gathered together because humanity had refused to look the other way when people were suffering. "Never," she admitted. "I thought we were just trying to help one planet. I didn't know we were changing the entire galaxy." The transformation had been remarkable. When news of the Zephyrian rescue spread, other species began coming forward with their own stories of Dominion cruelty. The silicon-based Rockborn revealed that they had been forced into slave labor in asteroid mines for decades. The aquatic Delphins told of how their ocean worlds had been poisoned for easier resource extraction. Dozens of civilizations that had been labeled inferior or economically unviable suddenly found their voices. Admiral Rebecca Kim, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and head of the new Galactic Defense Force, was coordinating the largest humanitarian mission in galactic history. Human medical ships worked alongside Altarian science vessels and Centaurian supply transports, bringing aid to worlds that had been forgotten for generations. "The numbers are staggering," reported her aide, Commander Lisa Wong. "We've evacuated over 500,000 beings from Dominion-controlled space in the last 4 months, and more requests for help come in every day." Kim nodded, but her expression remained serious. "What about the core Dominion? Any word from their territory?" "Nothing official, but our scouts report massive fleet buildups in their home systems. They're not accepting the collapse of their empire quietly." Kim had been expecting this. The outer Dominion territories had crumbled quickly once their subject species realized they didn't have to accept oppression anymore. But the core worlds, controlled by the original Dominion species, still commanded enormous military power. They wouldn't go down without a fight. On Earth, the changes were just as dramatic. The Zephyrian refugees had not only recovered their health, but had begun sharing their incredible abilities with their human rescuers. In the Australian outback, Zephyrian bioengineers worked with human scientists to restore land that had been considered permanently damaged. In the Sahara Desert, their unique relationship with crystalline structures was helping to build new cities that could thrive in the harshest environments. Dr. James Chen, formerly of Luna Colony and now head of the Interspecies Medical Exchange, watched a group of human and Zephyrian children playing together in Central Park. The Zephyrian youngsters' light patterns danced in harmony with their human friends' laughter, creating a display of living art that drew crowds of amazed onlookers. "They're not just recovering," he told his colleague, Dr. Patricia Santos. "They're becoming something new, something better than they were before the plague." "Maybe that's what happens when you survive the worst that someone can do to you," Santos replied. "Maybe you come back stronger." But the peaceful moment was interrupted by an urgent message from the outer system monitors. The screens throughout the park suddenly switched to an emergency broadcast. "Citizens of Earth," announced Admiral Kim from her command center. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet heading toward our solar system. The core Dominion is making their final move." The fleet that approached Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 300 ships of the line, including the massive fortress ship Eternal Dominion, flagship of Supreme Commander Thex Ruin himself. As evacuation sirens began wailing across Earth's cities, Elena found herself back where this all started, in a laboratory, working frantically to help save lives. But this time, she wasn't alone. Zephyrian scientists worked alongside human researchers, their combined knowledge creating solutions neither species could have achieved alone. "Elena," called Crystal Song from across the lab, "the defense grid calculations are complete. We can protect the planet, but we'll need every healthy Zephyrian working together." Elena looked at the data and felt her breath catch. "This will drain all of your energy. You could die from the effort." Crystal Song's light patterns shifted to show determination mixed with gratitude. "Dr. Rodriguez, you risked everything to save us when we were strangers. Now Earth is our home too, and these are our children playing in your parks. We will not let them be harmed." As the Dominion fleet entered the outer solar system, something unprecedented happened. Ships began arriving from across the galaxy, not military vessels but civilian craft. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining ships, research vessels, thousands of them, carrying volunteers from every species that humanity had helped over the past months. The captain of a converted Altarian freighter hailed the human defense forces. "Earth Control, this is Captain Velnara of the merchant vessel Hope's Light. We're not warriors, but we're here to stand with you." Similar messages poured in from across the solar system. The Rockborn had sent their massive industrial ships, now armed with improvised weapons. The Delphins brought their fast scout vessels. Even species that had never been involved in conflict before were arriving to help defend the world that had shown them compassion was possible. Supreme Commander. Ruin stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His intelligence reports had said Earth was defended by a small fleet. Instead, he found himself facing the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we count over 8,000 vessels. Most of them are civilian craft, but there are just so many of them." "It doesn't matter," Ruin snarled. "Civilian ships against military vessels, this will be a massacre." But as the battle began, Ruin quickly realized he had made a terrible mistake. The civilian ships weren't trying to fight his fleet ship to ship. Instead, they formed protective barriers around Earth, creating a living shield of volunteers who refused to let the Dominion reach the planet. And then, the Zephyrians acted. Every healthy Zephyrian on Earth, tens of thousands of them, joined, their energy together in a network of light that could be seen from orbit. Their combined power flowed through the planet's defensive systems, creating a barrier that even Ruin's most powerful weapons couldn't penetrate. "Impossible," he whispered, as his flagship's main cannon fired uselessly against the energy shield. "No single species has that kind of power." "You're right," came a voice over the communication channel. It was President Park speaking from Earth's surface. No single species does have that kind of power, but they're not a single species anymore. They're part of something bigger. They're part of a galaxy that decided to care about each other. As Ruin watched, his fleet began to surrender. Ship after ship powered down their weapons, their crews refusing to fight against the largest humanitarian coalition in galactic history. It's over, Park continued. The age of ruling through fear and abandoning the weak is finished. Today, we start building something better. 1 year later, Elena stood in the same spot where she had first met Crystal Song. But the world around them had been transformed completely. The broken Crystal City had been rebuilt, but not as it was before. Now it incorporated the best of both human and Zephyrian architecture, creating something entirely new and beautiful. Children of a dozen different species played together in gardens that glowed with bioluminescent flowers, while their parents worked side by side on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to achieve alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Crystal Song asked. "Everything you gave up to help us?" Elena thought about the question seriously. Humanity had indeed given up a lot. The old trade agreements, the comfortable neutrality, the simple life of staying out of other people's problems. But in return, they had gained something infinitely more valuable. They had gained a galaxy full of friends, a civilization built on compassion rather than fear, and the knowledge that when the universe tested their character, they had chosen to be heroes. "No," she said finally, watching a human child and a young Zephyrian work together to plant a tree that would grow in both soil and crystal. "I don't regret it for a second." Above them, ships from 100 different worlds moved peacefully through space, carrying supplies to worlds in need, medicines to the sick, and hope to the forgotten. The galaxy had indeed turned away from what it used to be, but in turning away, it had found something much better. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to do what it did best, stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, and prove that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything.